May I now cordially invite Professor Shamika Hirimburegama, Chairperson of the University Grants Commission, to present a token of appreciation to Professor Lakshman Jayatilaka. Thank you, Madam. Ladies and gentlemen, it's certainly an honor to the University of Colombo to have Dr. Chandra Ambuldinia as the former Vice Chancellor of the University of Uvavellassa as our guest speaker today. Therefore, without further ado, I may now invite Dr. Nirmali Pallavatta, Chairperson of the Annual Research Symposium year 2013, to introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you. Venerable Sirs, Your Excellency, members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen. Chandra Ambuldinia is the founder and former Vice Chancellor of the Uvavellassa University of Sri Lanka and has extensive experience in all aspects of higher education, including the initial setup of a university, its financing, running its day-to-day operations, and establishing rules of good governance. He is the first person from the private sector to be invited to set up a university by the government of this country. This was in October 2004. He was appointed as the Vice Chancellor of the then newly established Uvavellassa University in July 2005 and completed 2 terms by 2011. He takes credit for establishing the first entrepreneurial university in Sri Lanka in Badulla, which has now become a centre of excellence for value addition to the national resource base. Uvavellassa University, under his guidance, has given new direction to the higher education landscape of Sri Lanka by producing graduates ready for jobs in a market-driven economy and capable of applying value addition technology. He has gained 40 years of distinguished service experience in Sri Lanka and overseas after his graduation from the University of Peradeniya with a special degree in mathematics. He also holds a postgraduate diploma in mathematics and he has been honoured by the Uvavellassa University with a PhD. He is currently the consultant to Central Lancashire, the United Kingdom, which is establishing the largest British university outside of the United Kingdom. He was a private sector leader and has considerable experience in all commercial aspects of industry and in agricultural technology. He has held leadership positions as the Chief Executive Officer, a Director and General Manager of several leading companies. To cite a few, he was the President of the National Chamber of Commerce, the founder president of BIMSTEC, Chamber of Commerce and Industry for Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Nepal and Bhutan, and the founder president of the Business Council for Sustainable Development in Sri Lanka, and as a regional network partner of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. He was a member of the Education Cluster of the Ministry of Education from 2004 to 2005 and served in 2 higher education policy reform committees. They are the Higher Education Policy Reform Committee of the National Education Commission and the Cost and Financing Committee for Higher Education Reforms. He has also been on boards, commissions, councils and many committees, including the Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission, the Industrial Technology Institute, the Sri Jayawardena University, the Informatics Group, Informatics Institute of Technology, the National Labour Advisory Committee, the Skills Development Fund, Southern Region Economic Advancement Project, Western Region Developmental Council, The University Grants Commission Standing Committees on Agricultural Education and the University Grants Commission Standing Committee on Quality Assurance. His achievements and contributions to the higher education sector, to industry, and for promotion of effective interfaces between all these are too numerous to mention here. He is highly recognized for his contributions to the advancement of national development. We are greatly honored by his acceptance of our invitation to be our guest speaker at the Annual Research Symposium 2013. Dr. Chandra Ambul Denia.
Thank you, Nirmali, for the generous description of whatever we have done. Professor Hariratna, Acting Vice Chancellor, His Excellency General Qureshi, High Commissioner for Pakistan in Sri Lanka, Professor Lakshman Jayatillaka, my friend and the first person who revealed the World of University's quality assurance, and along with another 5 professors. Deans, senior lecturers, students. My apologies, Venerable Sirs. Today, I picked your theme as my title. That is Higher Education through State Sector of Sri Lanka in Competitive Knowledge Economy. And I say walk the talk. I say walk the talk because I have heard the same theme and the same concepts of reforms and people so dedicated like Professor Jayatillaka speaking to us over and over again, time and time again, how and what we need to do. We can stop for a moment and think whether we have achieved what we wanted to do. And I am so disappointed to say that we have not got ourselves to the place where we really want to be. Now, I have a little problem because I don't have my computer in front of me to make the, so I had to turn it out. Anybody who is looking for the detailed paper, I have it with me, I can give you a copy, but I don't think Dr. Nirmali should circulate it because it's a bit too long, about 12 pages. Now, okay, you want me to move? Okay, fine. Okay, so I this chart and the table showed you where we were in 2005. Sorry, I beg your pardon, 1950 and to date, the last 60 years. In 1950, our position was about the 5th. Our means Sri Lanka's position was about the 5th in the entire region. These are very well known. In fact, some people say we were the 2nd next to Japan. But if you look at the per capita, you will see that we were about the 5th in the region out of 16 countries. And today, fortunately, we have saved ourselves at 9th position. But there are lots of countries very rapidly moving up the ladder in per capita terms. That means how well off the people are, some indicator, not everything. They will catch up with us very soon, very soon. Now the chart shows you the curves of the other countries, how fast they exceeded us and moved forward while we remain at the bottom. And also, China is also overtaking us in per capita terms, not the wealth, they're so big. And India is coming up so rapidly. They will overtake us very soon. Just keep that in mind. Now there are lots of reasons. I have given all the details in my paper. I'm not going to tell you. Now, when you look at this chart shows you now that dotted line is GDP in current prices. Sorry, the blue line, this is in constant prices, the red line, and the black line is what we could have been really, had we not had all the misadventures in the past. You know what misadventures are? We had coup d'etats, then we had all the communal violence, then we had the LTTE, all the terrorist activities that were going on, the war, and finally, slight change and moving up. Now, what I'm trying to point out to you is, we did a lot of mistakes in the past. Don't make those mistakes again. And as an academic community, I put entirely the responsibility on your shoulders, because you can only make the difference between politics and development. Now, another point. We continue to remain in the industrial age. The industrial age, we work in functional silos, aren't we? All your faculties are silos, all your departments are silos, so tightly controlled by the heads of departments. Companies are working like silos, right? And each one is for himself and for his department. Very arm's length transactions with the customers, very low cost standardized products and services, protected domestic markets. I'm not saying that we should open up this like that, but we should intelligently do that, approach it. Then we perceive the life cycles of products as indefinite. They go on and on and on. Think of hundreds of our products. Then we have the white collar and the blue collars. Also we have the traditional systems of accounting looking at bottom line only. These are all symptoms of our industrial age. Then we come to this knowledge economy, what we are working today based on information. I have given the definitions and a lot of clarifications here, please read that. We are, and today, an information society. If you measure the wealth of companies today, globalized or not, big companies, 75% of the wealth of a company today is intangible. It's not a tangible asset. lots of books about it. I have given references. We compete on information and knowledge in the intangible assets based wealth creation. So if it is 75%, then we need to really have the skills to manage the intangible assets, not the tangible assets. We have been always thinking and learning how to manage tangibles, not the intangibles. So that should be your biggest skill. Then representing information and knowledge. How do we do that? Demand a new set of skills on how to manage intangible assets. Fast mobility of skills across the globe, and also instantaneous transportability of information. What are these intangible assets I'm talking about? Customer relationships. Now, in our, I think where science students come to the university, rarely even thinks about anything outside chemistry, physics, maths, biology, zoology, botany, chemistry. No relationships. But in the workplace today, relationships have become the most valuable skill that any student must have. Then customer loyalty, when you're working. Employee motivation, how to do that? Employee skills and capabilities. Process capabilities, to respond speedily to customer and market needs. Faster response times. I'm not going into the details of this because a lot to speak about it, but just the point, then the quality of products. New customer segments. Now, day before yesterday I saw in the papers, they will talk even about customer segments. Now, they talk about millennial people. I think IT people will know that, right? Then innovative products to match exact customer needs. Supply chain management. Optimizing value chain. Do we know what our value chain, where you are? Where your university is in the value chain? Databases and information technology. I mean, these are only a few things. Much more. Then there are knowledge economy processes, cross-functional business processes, closer relationships for creating greater value to customers, integrated raw material supply to the production and delivery based on customer orders, customized services and products even for small orders without loading additional costs, catering to global customers with equal sensitivity as for your domestic customers. Professor Jati was talking about the export board. Have you seen the list? Good question. Some of our people, when they export, they think, they will never see the supply, so you can't really get away by sending anything. But what happens is the country and that export goes down with that. And the same thing happens to us. We are importing a whole lot of junk in the market, and I have seen reports about warehouses full of this kind of rubbish coming into our country, and how people are consuming it very, I would say, stupidly, because they are not so well protected by the system. So like that, you get so many processes, the knowledge workers, new strategic management tools are there, then catering to global customers, all these things, I think, these are processes that we need to be aware of. Then, strategic management. I think it's a very good subject that most of you must be studying in the management faculty or the arts faculty and some of the arts management related areas. But this is a subject that anyone who is aspiring to become a leader today, which you are supposed to be, should have some idea about. A new customer value proposition. You see, if I ask an ordinary, a normal graduate in the country today or any lecturer today, what is your value proposition? What is your institution's value proposition to whoever whom you are catering, right? I'm sure they will tell me, yes, I'm giving them a good degree, I'm teaching them this subject. But there is much more to it. I will come to a different slide and explain to it. You need to have a very clear idea about what you are really giving your students or the people you are working with. A better internal process geared to deliver value to your customers. How do you redesign? Professor Jacob was really asking you a number of questions about, what we should be doing, how you can do, how to get the students to brainstorm, put a half a sheet of paper with ideas, and these are great ideas, but it doesn't stop at idea level. You need to design your process to deliver that value to your customer. Absolutely important. Then, and the right setup of a learning and growth organization. You are a learning and growing organization. Not only yourself, but you go to any company today, they don't even think about what they are learning and growing. Every organization is a learning and growing organization. How to set up your learning and growing perspective in your organization. I will come to that. And these are all linked one to another strategically, and you need to map it out so that the final value is delivered. Now, you can do a strategic map for doing the good things or the bad things, or the right things and the wrong things. I can give very good examples, but let me get on with the presentation. I will run short of time. Through sustained growth and productivity themes, you need to have different themes. For example, if you are working on a, say for example, nanotechnology theme in this university with knowledge, research, and the whole works, you need to really have these 4 perspectives defined very clearly and linked up to one another, and exactly get on with the process that will really deliver the value at the end. Then to generate profitable financial performances. Now, in our case, in the university, it's a fiduciary responsibility, not a financial outcome, but finances are very important to you because you don't have money. So you really need to earn your money. How do you earn your money? So think about it. Culminating in realizing the vision of the enterprise. You are an enterprise. Just to come to this point about what Prime Minister Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister, this preceding present Prime Minister, said about his students in the country. The challenge this century is a global skills race. I'm sorry, I can't read it very clearly, so I can read it on my computer. Let me help you. The challenge this country has is a global skills race, and that is why we need to push ahead faster with our reforms to extend education opportunities for all. Globalization dictates that the nations that succeed will be those that bring out the best in people and their potential. And this is the new opportunity for Britain. Put simply, in the past, we upskilled or unlocked only some of the talents of some of the student people The challenge now is to unlock all the talents of all the people. I wish our people say this and know how to do this. But this was previous Prime Minister, and there's a lot of, this is on the internet, you can find it. I have given the references in my paper. Now, how do we unlock all the talents of all our students? That's the question, right? And they know pretty well all the other countries who are racing ahead of us. In that first chart I showed you, they are up to it now. So there are lots of other things that are happening around the world that makes them move faster and faster ahead, overtaking us, because we are not doing those things in Sri Lanka, but we are at the right moment of time to do that. Strategic management, I said this, I knew, okay, I said this, okay. Right. So that's what I said. We need to, this is also the opportunity for our higher education sector to come together and no time to waste. Professor Jayatilaka, I didn't talk with Professor Jayatilaka before I came here. He said, collectively, use the word collectively. I will also say collectively, harmoniously, unanimously, and develop your strategy, how to do this. And we are all at your service, all there to help you. There are lots of people who will help brilliant, lively, active organizations like the Colombo University. Don't need a certificate for Colombo University to shine as the #1 university in the region. When we talk about competitiveness, I want to show you this annual report that comes out. The World Economic Forum study, the GCI study, everybody knows about this now, and Global Competitiveness Index. It's an excellent report because I have seen how it has evolved over the years and how it has brought out the relative competitiveness position with regard to taking 12 pillars and analyze the data on 12 pillars, and they give these statistics for us to see very clearly. And I have done some explanations in the paper. I don't have the time to go through all that, but let me highlight a few things. Now the 12 pillars are institutions, infrastructure, macroeconomic environment, health and primary education. Now these are very basic factors, basic requirements, right? In other words, like for a primary level economy like ours, these are some basic factors. Then efficiency enhancers, higher education and training, goods market efficiency, labor market efficiency, financial market development, technological readiness, and market size. These are the efficiency enhancers. When you go to the higher level, the real value added level, through innovation and sophistication factors. And business sophistication is one pillar and innovation is another pillar. Right? We as a country, Sri Lankans, are in the transition stage from being the primary basic requirement level, move to the transition stage. We are not efficiency level yet, but our aim should be to get there. And not stopping at efficiency level, but to get to the innovation level. Now this is again told to you by Professor Jayatara, that our aim should be to get working on our national resource base, to add value to the national resource base, to make it an innovation economy. And there is so much scope. I mean, if I had the money, I would have done that. I would have invested in research, a hell of a lot. But I don't have that money. I'm only telling people. And I'm making some people do the right thing to get the right thing happen. So, now, you can see all the positions and the ranks that we are standing. I will tell you some of the few things. That in labor market efficiency, we had 129 positions out of 144 countries. By the way, I mean, it makes me very sad to read out that our country we stood at 68 position yesterday, and last year we stood at 52nd position out of 144 countries, and the year before that we were 62nd position. So you can see we are, sort of vacillating around the 60s and the 50s. I hope we will not go down but move up. But there are lots of things that we need to do if we want to be moving up. Now, then I want to take two things. That is the higher education and training pillar and the innovation pillar, because those are very relevant in the context of what we are aiming to do, because we want to get to the efficiency level, complete that job, and then get to the next level of innovation. So, in the higher education and training pillar, we have secondary education enrollment, gross enrollment ratio. Now, I know that you all have been fighting for this, and it's only about 15% in the country. And we rank at the 100th position out of 144. So we really need to increase the number of people who get into the universities. As you all know, these numbers have been stated over and over and over again. We have more than 100,000 eligible people who are not entering university today. Right? They're looking for other sources, and we don't have a place in the country. So what I can do is, I can ask the private sector, come, put your money here, and then make institutions that can deliver world-class education. And I'm doing that, frankly. I'm hoping to build the best, largest university in this country. I hope I can do it one day. And actually, all the universities can do this. If you ask me how to do it, I can show you how Colombo can do this. How we can double and triple your capacity. The internet access to school, it's at 105th position. Then I would say secondary school education, the gross rate is like 78th position. It's about 87.1. It's high. The fact that we are in the 78th rank means all the other countries are ahead of us. So, extent of staff training is at the 80th position. Then availability of research and training services at the 63rd. Then the quality of math and science education is 69th. Somehow our management schools have come to the level of 38th position, and also quality of education system is at the 33rd level. So, my warning to you is, don't be misled by this. The fact that the management schools in our country are producing the largest number outside, because we can't produce the scientists and the technologists in this country. We don't have the facility, no laboratory. So somehow the management schools have been taken over by the accountants, right? The management schools have been taken over by those who have never been to Columbia University or to any other university that is producing, right? So their numbers are so big and the graduates are so few in this country. So when you do a survey, getting the responses from number of people and the numbers will seem so big and the management side would look as if, we are doing very well. But that's only a misconception. Please don't be misled, right? Then, if you look at the innovations, you will find the capacity for innovation is at the 90th. You don't have to be told by V.R. Supua. I am chairing the technology panel of the National Science Foundation for a couple of years now. I am so saddened by the few applicants that we get. And who are these people? They're renowned professors who have been there for a very long time, and a few people outside who come. I mean, we give a technology grant for about 15 or 20 people annually, and that's after much hassle of giving one or two earlier. I mean, I want to liberalize this and give as much funds as possible to people so that they can start doing their research and make them commercial, of some commercial value. That never, I don't know why it is not happening. Why the universities are not taking an interest in doing this? Because all of you do your research for a CV. All of you do your research, I'm sorry if I'm hurting you, but I'm telling you so that I will drive a point here, that you really need to go to the IPR down the DR Vijayawardena Mawata and file an application for your intellectual property before you go to the publication, right? So now you have this document that is here. I don't know, I haven't been able to study that yet. But if there is any intellectual property that is of any value here, that should not have been here first. It should have been with the company registrar, or in his office there is a little section for the registration of property rights. Put the application. For 3 years they will mess with the application, and they will say they are doing their search and all that. At the end they will send you a letter saying, okay, your IPR has been registered, right? But you really need to work on that before you put any publications here. And this is one of the ways that we really can add value to our national resource base if we want to do anything about it, right? Then, quality of scientific institutions, 57. Companies spending on R&D, partly I am responsible, 82nd place. Because companies don't spend on R&D in our country, I must tell you. It's so pathetic. Recently, after our telling the Treasury for several years, the Treasury gave so much tax concessions. So attractive. I don't think our people have even realized the value of them. I don't think they, after even having realized, want to make use of that, because there is much better ways of making money in this country for the people who have money. How? They can import. I beg your pardon, sir, Pakistan is, from Pakistan we are importing a lot of things here, right? Which could have been manufactured here in Sri Lanka. And what has happened to the free trade agreement that we have in India? 1 to 10. All the buses on the road, the transport sector, whole lot of consumer items, they're all coming from India. So 1 to 10. We need to do something about this, People like you in the laboratories think how you can really help the companies innovate these new products and put them into the market. Because we go on that assumption that, the products have indefinite life cycle. And we just assume that, somebody has given us this brand, it's trusted, and we keep on. No. I think this Vice Chancellor of the university must take the leadership to transform something for the future in this country. I think technology is what we really need, and that should come from you. So, then university industry collaboration in R&D, Professor Jayatillaka said that very nicely, and 118 positions. And I think we, with a lot of hard work done by some of the lecturers, there are others who are just indifferent. If they want, let them go and find a job. But no, I think there is some industry collaboration that has developed, And the industry like to show this as the social responsibility. They put people through the companies for 3 months or 6 months, and so that the students can carry that in their CV, trained in such and such a company, and there are lots of people who are doing it. So I think this relationship building with the private sector must actively, proactively be driven as one of the intangible asset management strategies of any university, and that has to happen, right? So then, PCT patents, this is what I told you about. That is at the 68th position, the intellectual properties. You really need to. I was in Korea, I was in Vietnam, I've been to the innovation parks, I've been to a number of, listened to a lot of people, how they do these things. I think we are nowhere, I think we don't even know about, have any appreciation of what they are doing. So we really need to, that knowledge has to come from you. I know that a lot of you go and attend these conferences and you have to pass the knowledge to other people, get them to listen to you and then transform that, make that transformation. Then, let me move on. Setting up an entrepreneurial, I can talk authoritatively about that because I have set up one at UAV Lhasa. In 2004, I was invited, and they presented a set of things that I need to do there. First, because they asked me to help them in 2004, the UGC chairman was Professor Ranjit Mendis. I've been criticizing them so much about the education. They told me, okay, you show us, okay? So that's how I got involved, but I was in the private sector at that time. Of course, I was on the boards of a number of universities. Employable graduates with desirable skills needed by the industry. Identify and serve the needs of a global market for higher education and industry needs. Do they sound unreasonable? I don't think it is. Programs relevant to the economic productivity of resources and inclusive development. Inclusive development. How much do you contribute in the inclusive development? You can ask the question yourself. Research on value addition to the national resource base and innovate. Free of ragging and disabling unionisms. I'm a bit scared to talk about that. Reduce dependence on state funds. Improve access to a greater population of Sri Lanka. These were the terms of reference that was given to me by word, by letter, and so many discussions I had to debate with the Grants Commission, which was made up of people of the same vintage as Professor Jayatilaka, like Professor Senaka Bandaranayake, Professor Carlo Fonseca, and chaired by Professor Ranjit Mendis. And also there were a few other people who were really thinking that we should have a change but didn't know how they should be doing. So they asked me. I'm very grateful to them for having asked me because I had the opportunity to do that at UAV Lhasa. If anyone has been to UAV Lhasa while I was there, you will know what I'm talking, because I would say that is one of the most beautiful universities, and I'm proud to say that. And both physically and metaphorically. And it has beautiful architecture, it has all the right programs in my mind. All the programs are designed to add value to the national resource base, and they are really talking about value addition to the national. Tea, rubber, coconut palms, and then mineral sciences, aquatic resources, then talk about anything that is really national, it is there. And also science and technology. In 2005, we labeled our science faculty as science and technology faculty. The UGC was a bit reluctant and the professors were a bit reluctant to change the name to science and technology. But I was bold enough, I did that. Right? Because I had nothing to lose. Only thing I said, if you don't want me to do this, take it over, do it. That's all. But they didn't want to do that also, so they let me do it. And I must say they were very much accepting the arguments I presented to them, how we should be moving forward, and they accepted the strategy. And as a result today, I'm proud to say that we have one university that we don't have ragging there, right? We don't have, I mean, in the first year, when the first batch of students passed out, more than, I think 25% of the students came up with innovation. Poor me didn't have money to help them to take that to the commercial level, but the companies came in, took all those students and gave them jobs. Why? Because those students had the knowledge about the industry they were playing in and trying to compete in, and these students were creating new products. So that was one advantage I had. So like that, you know, there are a few more batches that passed out. And so, just to cut a long story short, I will be honored. I think I saw my name in the management postgraduate faculty as a keynote speaker. And I will be making a presentation exactly about how to go about, thanks to Dr. Sunil Chanthuri, who invited me, right? And about how we did it. So, there are a few lessons from Uwe experience. The slide is moving, sure, yes sir. Now, when I am talking about a strategy, this one single slide really sums up the gist of what I am saying. But there are lots of information you need to know before I get to this slide. The learning and growth, internal processes, customer value, and the long-term fiduciary responsibility, what it should be. So, and how it can lead to fulfill our mission, vision, and you know, the strategy, right? So, and anyone who has a familiarity with the balanced scorecard, how to get it working in your organization, and how to lead with the balanced scorecard, right, is something that we have here. So, you know, the most, I told you at the very outset that the knowledge economy is about managing intangibles, managing intangible assets. If you look at the learning and growth perspective there at the very end on this side, it's about human capital, it's about information capital, and also the organization capital. And what is organization capital? It's the culture of the organization. It's the leadership of the organization. It's the teamwork of the organization. How do you work as a team? If one group of people in the university is dragging the university in one direction, and if another faculty is dragging you in another direction, if somebody else is thinking in a different way, where is the organization capital? One is positive, the other one is negative, the net sum is like 0. So you really need to make it a Kaizen, or slowly move up the technology ladder, up the value chain, up the value ladder. You really need to do that. How to happen? How to make it happen? And the internal processes at the Uwe Wellassa University, I introduced 3 or 4 different new processes so that people can deliver the value that they are proposing to give to the students, and so that the students can take it to the private sector and to the society and to the country at large. And then I have defined the customer value proposition, and in my first lecture to the students I give that. And with the parents. So they all go home understanding what we are trying to do in the university. And I have no conflict with my parents, because they always come to me to ask how their sons and daughters are performing. You might not like it, you might think it is a school, but it happens naturally. So, I'm not going to talk about the fiduciary responsibility. Fiduciary responsibility is twofold. How do you propose to grow as a university? And we remained at 10,000 for the last 50 years, or do you propose to go to 20,000 in the next 10 years? And how to do that, or sooner. Now, you might be surprised to know that what I have done at UA Wellassa, some of the world universities started after that, and they are doing it not because I told them, but it is the right thing to do. Fortunately, I had the opportunity to speak at the Oxford Side Business School when they had UALT, that is the university, next generation of leaders, how they were going through a training program to develop. Now, there were vice chancellors, there were deans in that audience, and they listened to me, right? Absolutely no conflict. They all wanted to do that, and they learned a little bit from me also because I gave them my experience. Now, higher education trends in the world. There are lots of universities in the in UK and US who are doing this. I think some of these I have listed here. Stanford is doing the same thing that we have done. They are breaking down silos. There are no silos in these universities. The new ones, they don't have silos. When I say silos, it is your faculties. Now, at UA Wellassa, I wanted to start with one label because we had to have a label in a faculty according to our Universities Act, but they didn't want me to do that. So I had to put 3 labels as 3 faculties, but science and technology was one faculty. But actually, these are barriers, these are bottlenecks, these are silos. Because the whole idea today is to give the student a breadth of knowledge. How do you do that? Within silos, you can't. Because the management professor and the economics professor is sitting in another faculty. And when I was a student at Terra, the best professors for mathematics and engineering were across the river on the engineering side. And I could not listen to any of them as my lecturer. I would have loved. And the best economists were sitting, best economists in the country, were at the art faculty at Terra, and I could not listen to them, any economics. I had to do it on my own later after I passed out. So we really need to break down these silos and then really learn how to introduce interdisciplinary programs or interdisciplinary programs, or you call it whatever, give the breadth of students, give the breadth of knowledge to the students. That's what we really need to do. And give them the skills, and give them also today the entrepreneurial skills. Right. And it should be common knowledge to all the students, undergraduates who pass out today from the university. Right? So, you can see some of the schools, and even in Saudi Arabia, the King Abdullah University, they are putting up a $10 billion university. Can you imagine their investment? Much bigger than our total entire budget for 5 years. Actually, they are setting up a university without any departments, any faculties, right? And so that's why I'm saying, now even the former Prime Minister of UK, he knew that we were all doing that. So he was telling that you change yourself. You change yourself now, otherwise you will be losing your competitive advantage to all the Asian countries, right? All the South Asian countries, all the East Asian countries who are now doing it fast. Fortunately for us, we have been given a knowledge hub as our countries, one of the 5 hubs that we need to develop in our country. Make use of that. And it won't happen tomorrow, but you need to step in and you need to make it happen over the time, over the period. How do you do that? That's where you come your knowledge and convert that into an economy. Right. So, the technology trends in the world, I think your knowledge economy should help the entire university transform into a science, technology, engineering-oriented university. When I say that science, technology, engineering-oriented university, I'm not asking Professor Sunil Chandrasiri to leave his job. No. He will be in every one of yours curriculum. Because today an interdisciplinary program will not run without the student knowing economics in his curriculum. It should be there. And you are learning Tamil language. Every single student must learn Tamil. And every Tamil student must learn Sinhala today. There is no escaping the fact. You need to do that. And we are doing it there at Uvavelasa. And we have to pass that. We have identified 5 essential skills, and those 5 essential skills, and then the entrepreneurial management, all those things are coming as an essential skill to all students, right? So basically, do that. So I think, given some trends in very commonly available, quoting the sources, and I think I'm exceeding my time now, so I will stop here. If anybody wants the full paper, because the information is here, I'd be happy to give you. You can make copies and take it. And thank you very much, and all the very best to you guys.
Thank you very much, sir, for your words of wisdom. May I now cordially invite Professor T.R. Ariyaratne, Acting Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo, to present a token of appreciation to Dr. Chandra Ambulenia. Thank you, sir.